Now, to look further into what these developments mean, we have with us Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung Hee University. Professor, thank you for coming in today.
Good to be here.
Now, Kim Yong-chol, one of Kim Jong-un's most senior and trusted advisors, some of the media calling him Kim's right-hand man, if you will. He's coming to New York now. He's on his way.
Right.
What does this what does this visit mean right now for the U.S.-North Korea relationship coming right now at this time?
Well, his visit comes after this flurry of activities happening in Singapore, in Panmunjom, and of course after a flurry of posturing for negotiation. And it seems like it indicates that the relationship is going towards certainly a meeting and also deepening the relationship between the two parties, or having a better relationship. Yeah. So him being a number 2 in a power ranking is very significant. That is probably in the last stages of making a certain arrangement for the meeting, which is due to be held in less than 2 weeks.
Does this meeting signal that they're nearing an agreement on how to denuclearize? Are they finally resolving some of the disputes, the points of conflict that they've been having over the last few weeks?
I think that's the key issue. That's probably subject matter being discussed in Panmunjom as well as in New York, and maybe possibly in Washington as well. I think that the nuclearization, what it means and what kind of steps they will take, that has been the biggest question mark so far, and probably that was a cause for the posturing in the negotiation stage. Because of that, probably that will go on to be thorny issues or unresolved issues probably until the last. I mean, I don't think everybody can agree on certain set of measure right away because it's so complicated.
I mean, as you said there's 2 meetings almost going on at the same time. The one in Panmunjom and this one that's coming up, it seems to be in New York, between Kim Yong-chol and Mike Pompeo. What is there left to talk about for Kim Yong-chol and Mike Pompeo when there's another talk coming on in Panmunjom? I mean, what are the 2 meetings talking about separately?
Right. I think the level could be different. Probably in New York meeting, it's more of a high level and more abstract level, because at this point we cannot say that the posturing of 2 sides has completely been resolved. I think I would not be very surprised if there's a further kind of tensions easing and resolving, simply because that key issue of denuclearization has not been completely resolved. So I think that this visit to New York and possibly to Washington further strengthens the willingness of two parties to meet and negotiate over certain issues. But what that issue will be and what the outcome will be is probably still be negotiated. And I think that's significant because what we are talking about is the probably long-term peace and prosperity regime in East Asia. And it's not just about the relationship between North Korea and United States and also South Korea. It involves Japan, it involves China. So it is a package that involves everybody and affects everybody. So the details and the direction is something that needs to be talked about and examined by every party. So I think that it's having a 2-level talks is at least a minimum. Probably the China will try to get involved and Japan is trying to get involved. So this negotiation or this discussions will likely to continue.
Washington seems to be signaling that they very much want this summit to happen. For example, Kim Yong-chol is on the U.S. blacklist of sanctions, and he's technically supposed to be banned from visiting the U.S., but it looks like he's been granted a special waiver. I mean, is that allowed? I mean, can you explain how this might work?
Well, it's a sanction imposed by the U.S., so out of necessity, they can ease it without affecting anybody. He's not being sanctioned in that manner by the United Nations or anything. But I think that the North Korea would try to interpret it as kind of larger than what it exactly means. Probably they'll see the harbinger of easing of sanctions in many different areas that we are suffering from.
When Mike Pompeo visited Pyongyang previously, he was granted an audience with Kim Jong-un. Do you think Donald Trump will extend the same offer to Kim Yong-chol?
Well, I think that the expectation is that same kind of things will happen. But we can look further back, as you mentioned before, in 2000, when then number 2 power holder in the North Korea, Jo Myung-nok, when he visited the U.S., he met with Bill Clinton at the time. So if that's precedent, probably the diplomatic protocol is that the good-natured or good relationship will extend to having an audience with Donald Trump. I think that'll serve as a further showing of gesture from the Donald Trump's part that he's willing and he is extending this kind of courtesy to grant the meeting.
You mentioned there the previous meeting of a high official in 2000, 18 years ago. I mean, it seems to be almost a reflection of what happened then and what's happening now. But what do you think are the differences between these two meetings right now that 18 years has passed during that time? Or are we just seeing a repeat of history, do you think?
Well, it's part of it is a repeat of history, and I think that's the skeptic's point of view, saying same thing will happen. But the difference I see is that back then, the North Korea's position was not as strong as today, as in having actual nuclear weapons that can be menacing to the U.S. Another difference is that in 2000, it was kind of a last stage or last year of Bill Clinton's presidency. And right after they met, George Bush was already elected a president or a president-elect. So I don't think the logistics quite worked out. Probably Bill Clinton would not have insisted that at the last stages of his presidency, he will make some kind of splash in the diplomatic scene. So this time around, Donald Trump does not have that constraint, and I think it's controlled by his desire to make legacy at this point that will affect his future re-election bid and also the slew of the elections that could happen in the congressional level. So, not to mention Nobel Prize prospect. So, I think the motivation is better, certainly better than in year 2000.
So, as you mentioned there previously, you said China wants to get looks like China wants to get involved with these talks as well. Before Kim Yong-chol came to the U.S., he stopped over in Beijing, and he's reported to have met with Beijing officials. That raises a lot of questions. What would he have talked about? What would they have told him before he met Mike Pompeo and possibly with Donald Trump?
Yeah, as you remember, there was concern for China for what is called the China passing, because they are not really an important factor in that setting. But I think that North Korea wants China to be there, at least as an insurance or somebody who would guard over whatever the regime that they come up with. And China certainly wants to be there as one of the heavyweight in the region. So I think that at least there would be a close communication as to what is being discussed and what is to be discussed. I don't think that China is per se controlling North Korea's actions. I think North Korea has, for its part, has an incentive to keep a certain arm's length distance to China because they want to play the middle role between the U.S. and China to get the best benefits out of it. So, but both parties in that setting has a desire and motivations to be close in contact, at least when the meeting happens in Singapore.
There are also rumors emerging that Xi Jinping may go to Singapore for the summit on June 12th. Before the summit on June 12th,
right.
That he might have a third summit with Kim Jong-un himself before the U.S.-North Korea summit. By trying to stay so involved like this, do you think it betrays some of China's desperations or fears that they are being overlooked, that they are being passed and sidelined?
Well, I think that the optics of it seems to be serving China because, well, as the heavyweight in the region, they want to have their fingers and arms in every major discussions and development. And certainly East Asia's security and the economic regime that we're looking to establish is certainly the the kind of things they cannot pass on. I think that they were looking for opportunities as well as kind of containing of any kind of risk that might happen by having too close relationship between the North Korea and the U.S. because militarily and also economically, any bigger role in the U.S. in this region, in their mind, might mean the lesser, diminished role of China.
Let's go back to that working level talks that are happening in Panmunjom, as we mentioned earlier. They're carrying on for a third day, right today. They're said to be going on. They're said to be going well, but it does seem to be going on a bit longer than what we might have expected. Do you think they are making progress, or do you think there are some bumps that they're not really revealing yet?
Well, they have not revealed any big conflicts on that issue, so we're just keeping our fingers crossed. But the fact that there is a major visit from Kim Yong-chol to New York might indicate that has not hit any major bumps at this point. And also, as I mentioned before, I think this matter is very complex and very long perspective written one, because it might establish something that will abide by for the decades to come. And this is a significant issue that is affecting not only the region but the whole world, actually. And we have experienced the kind of nuclear threats that everybody was fearful of. So that complexity might drive the length of the meeting and how many times they meet. Probably I would expect that they would meet many more, because they don't want to come to, I mean they as in Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, who do not want to come to the meeting having any kind of uncertainties hanging over. They will not resolve any major issues at the time that they're sitting down across each other. They would want to have everything squared up, and maybe the joint communique or the declarations are already ready when they come to the island. Go to that point, probably the discussion, a lot of discussion is necessary, and that's what's happening.
There are another set of talks reportedly happening right now in Singapore. They seem to be about sorting out the logistical details between North Korea and U.S. and possibly with Singapore as well. Well, what do you think are the main points of discussion that are happening in Singapore right now? Probably
because they're meeting in another country, not in the U.S. or North Korea, the security probably and the logistics would be an important issue. The selection was seemingly, they have not announced the final selection, but the Sentosa Island is becoming a major candidate because the access to that island can be easily controlled, and it has just one bridge that can be blocked off. So in that sense, the venue, preparation of venue, and how the logistics and security would be handled, I think that would be the key issue, and I think it's making a pretty good progress at this point.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for your time again, as usual, Professor, and hope to see you again next time.
My pleasure. Thank you.